I'm meeting today with Ken Roach, and we're going to talk today about religious conflict in families, and in the context of both intact families or families that are going through divorce. So this is a very interesting topic we have not yet covered at this point. But before we do that, Ken, for people that would like to talk to you more or would be interested in learning more about this subject than what we cover in the brief time that we're together, would you give them your contact information, please?
Sure. So I have offices in Pleasant Grove and in Holiday, and my direct line is 801-792-7028. Thank you.
Yes. All right, now we're going to talk about situations where specifically, and we'll get to that at whatever good time Ken determines, but there have been marriages that break up over religious differences,
right.
Various kinds of religious differences, so take it away.
Right. Well, so one thing that I think is really important at the outset is to make it clear that this is not, or I have no intention or desire to bash being any particular religion, I don't have any desire to bash religion or to bash non-religion. I really want to approach this with the utmost of respect, because these are really deep challenges that happen inside a relationship when they happen, meaning that our feelings of spirituality and religion are at the core of our identity. And so when there are challenges around this, they're really painful inside and difficult inside a relationship.
Not so much a question of who's right or who's wrong, but how do we address the pain?
Exactly.
How do we address the conflict and the discomfort that this is causing?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
Well, and as we were mentioning a couple of minutes ago in setting up this conversation, sometimes, in fact I would say often, what I've seen is that individuals change over the lifespan. We grow, we change careers, we examine our beliefs, we change our minds about things, and that makes it difficult sometimes in relationship, because couples sometimes say, hey, you're not the same person I married. And indeed, that is the case. We do change, we do grow. And so if...
in some cases deteriorate.
Yeah. And so if I have an expectation that this is a part of what I signed up for, what I contracted for, what I expected when we got into this relationship, and I see my partner, my spouse changing, that can be a very difficult change.
When you've seen people coming to you because of a religious schism, which is a perfectly appropriate term in this setting, what can you do to help? I mean, is your perspective, how can I help keep the marriage together? Because another thing we talked about as we were preparing for this was, what about somebody who says, hey, I'm getting an annulment, not because you're a bad spouse, you've actually done right by me as far as just bringing home the bacon or taking care of me or being supportive, but you're not an Orthodox Jew, or you're not a practicing Mormon,
right,
or something like that, whatever it might be. What do you try to do? I mean, what is treating the problem? Is it keeping people married? Is it helping them to do a conscious uncoupling? I mean, how do you address it?
So there are many couples who manage to navigate those kinds of differences in relationship and demonstrate respect for each other, stay in the marriage, stay very healthy, stay connected, stay intimate. And there are some couples where the difference feels so important and so big in the relationship that the couple decides to end the relationship.
What are the mistakes that people who have these religious differences commit when they realize there is some religious incompatibility? What are the things that you say? It's like, if I could tell you now and save you some heartache, what would they be?
So I think this can happen. So I'll talk primarily, the one that I see the most is where one partner stops having the same belief as the other. That's by and large the most common scenario. So a couple, let's say they and again, the faith is not the primary issue here, but let's say both of them get married, they're both LDS, and one person says, I don't believe this anymore. So there's a challenge that immediately is set up on this, that whoever is the one who leaves can easily put pressure on the other. I want you to follow me. I want you to leave as well. Just as the person who is still in the faith hopes that the one who has left will come back. And so there tends to be a certain struggle that goes on inside of a relationship. I want you to believe as I do. No, I want you to believe as I do. And sometimes that conflict the conflict can be very, very destructive to the relationship.
Just suddenly, out of nowhere, all sorts of divided loyalties.
Exactly.
It's one thing to go up to somebody who's a Red Sox fan and say, well, I'm cheering for the other team, but when if you suddenly decide that you are going to be a Yankees fan,
right?
It's like, wait a minute, what?
Right.
Our whole relationship. We met at a playoff game, and we enjoy talking about this, and we enjoy reliving some of the glory. And now this is like the whole. I don't know you anymore.
Right.
That sort of thing, right? And then it's like, well, look, I came to my senses, and I don't believe this anymore. I'm free. I feel better.
Absolutely.
I want you to have the same benefits.
Absolutely.
But yet you feel, no, you've turned your back on all that is good and pure,
right?
And I need to save you,
right? And moral,
yeah.
and look, we want to raise our children, and we want our children to be moral, and this is the way to do it. And as you point out, the one sometimes who's left says, I've moved past this, I've moved beyond it, and that's a challenge as well.
Do you see people, because I think I do, I'm not a mental health professional, but sometimes I will see people that will go overboard to make a point, with the best of intentions, but it's like, I quit, so now I'm going to work extra hard on something that frankly never really mattered to me, but I've got to let my spouse and the other parent of these kids understand that I will not be trifled with and you will not control me, so I'm going to indoctrinate the kids, or I'm going to, what would I say? I'm going to disparage and denigrate beliefs that frankly, although I don't agree with them anymore, I really don't care. They haven't done a whole lot of harm. Do you see that as a natural reaction, or am I just seeing certain people react that way?
I don't see it all the time, but I've definitely seen it. So I would say the more that each partner feels disrespected, I would say the more likely it is that people are going to resort to those kinds of measures to make the point. And in contrast, if I feel respected and accepted, it's much easier to offer that gift in return.
Can you work from their historically shared beliefs to help find common ground, or do you try to say, no, we're not even going to look through the religious lens at all to find common ground? I think you see what I'm saying. Do we try to build on what's there, or do we chuck it all and say we're going to start from scratch and see where we stand?
So I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but I'll answer a question.
Fine.
So some people make a distinction. I think this is a useful distinction between religion and spirituality. And I'll make the distinction.
I am asking the same question, yeah. In other words,
cool.
Yeah.
So religion primarily being the practices, the scriptures, the rules, and so on. The culture, the
practices, yeah, okay.
Whereas spirituality tends to be more personal. That's my own internal compass or guidelines, relationship to higher power, if I feel that way, or just a sense about what do I see as the meaning or purpose of life. So when couples manage to connect around spirituality, and again, I'm making that distinction as opposed to the religion, then sometimes it's much easier to navigate the kinds of differences that we're talking. So again, if I happen to be somebody who's, let's say I happen to be, I was LDS and I'm not anymore, just say that's the case, then but I still identify as a very spiritual person. I just find my spirituality in a different place. If my spouse or my partner is still a very spiritual person, maybe concentrates on, but God and the Word of God is all about love and transcendence and so on, we may be able to navigate our differences just fine.
What about the mentality of somebody where one or both of the parties are of the mind that you're an infidel? And I'm not referring only to Islam.
Right.
I'm using the term infidel as like, hey, you know what? Either I've changed because I'm now right and I was wrong, or you're wrong and I don't know where to go or something. But what about somebody who says, then I must shun you?
Right.
Even if that person feels conflicted personally. But one thing I do know is that this is what I must do no matter how uncomfortable, no matter how painful this be. Or somebody's saying, well, if that, I'm going to have to cut off your head, figuratively, you know what I mean? What can somebody who's in the position of being the soon-to-be decapitated person,
right,
what do you do there? It's like, look, I don't bear my spouse any ill will,
right,
but my spouse now does.
Right.
Nothing I can do short of repenting and confessing my wicked ways. What can somebody in that situation do? And don't be afraid to, don't treat people with kid gloves. If the answer is, yeah, sorry, you might be better off starting a new family before you try to mend fences with your spouse. Whatever, and if that's not true, great. But
right. No, that's probably what I would say, and I appreciate the way you worded it, because I think that sentiment is possible for people who are religious as well as people who are not religious. So it's really a form of extremism to say, I am right, everyone is wrong, and I will only live with or tolerate or have as a member of my family someone who believes, thinks, behaves as I do. And anybody can fall into that trap. Anyone can fall into that.
In this or other areas.
Right.
Politically,
absolutely,
nutritionally, I mean, all sorts of other things.
Absolutely.
Philosophically.
Absolutely.
So, I was hoping I'd feel better after this conversation, but I actually am just as uneasy as I was before.
Mm-hmm.
And so if anything, I guess it's good to know that there aren't obvious answers that have eluded me or eluded people watching this.
Right.
What can people do to cope under the best and worst of circumstances as far as the services people in your profession offer?
So at best, and I think you gave a really good example of that, let's say that we live in Utah, so I'm going to pick, let's say that I'm still an active Mormon and my spouse is no longer an active Mormon. So to the extent I can come to terms with the fact that my spouse still loves our children, still loves me, wants the best for us, for our relationship, that we work together as a team, that there are many other things that we share, we enjoy, we do together, that I still love and respect my spouse, then that's the best that we can hope for.
You raise an interesting point. Can I righteously look down my nose at this person, or is there a place for that, or is that wrong-headed? Do you see what I'm saying? And again, I'm somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but I'm not completely.
Right. So I like to think of that as a human temptation that all of us have, is to be somewhat self-righteous, that I've got it figured out and others don't. And yet I think there's an arrogance in it that partners and others pick up on. And I think it ultimately wounds our partners and hurts the relationship.
How do you, if you're aware of that but still have those sentiments, how do you deal with it so you don't, so the arrogance isn't there, but also a phoniness isn't covering it up?
No, I like that a lot. So I think there's the honesty in relationship is still important. And so I think the more that each partner is able to, we use the term own, of course, or own or express what they believe. So an example of that might be to simply say, look, what I believe is really important to me, and I want that acknowledged and respected in this relationship. And so I think there's a way to get that across without saying, and I think you're completely wrong-headed and misguided.
I can respect your right to your opinions without respecting the opinion itself.
Right.
That's excellent. Well, thank you. I feel a little better now because there is some hope. So this is clearly a problem that you could be a lot of help to people on because it's often hits them like a ton of bricks out of nowhere.
Absolutely.
So for those that would like to speak to you again or follow up with you, would you please give us your contact information
Sure.
one more time?
Yes, so it's Ken Roach, 801-792-7028.
Thanks again, Ken.
Thank you.